Welcome to this Animal Notebook Explainer, Diplodocus, the dinosaur decoded. Today, we're diving straight into the world of one of the most iconic creatures to literally ever walk the Earth. Let's get right into it.
Just look at this magnificent animal. When you picture a dinosaur in your head, there is a really good chance something exactly like this pops up, right? We're talking about the Diplodocus. It's a true Jurassic giant that roamed western North America way back between 154 and 149 million years ago. Today, we're going to explore its incredible scale, its honestly alien-like anatomy, and exactly how a 90-foot titan survived day to day.
So, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll meet the Jurassic giant, then break down the anatomy of a titan, explore its diet and daily life, look at its discovery and legacy, and finally, wrap up by answering your top frequently asked questions.
All right, Section 1. Meet the Jurassic giant.
Okay, so the baseline stats on the Diplodocus are just absolutely staggering. We're talking about an animal that stretched up to 85, maybe even 90 feet in length, wandering the river systems of what we now call the Morrison Formation in the western U.S. But here is the crazy part, the part that always surprises people. Despite being that incredibly long, they were surprisingly lightweight. They weighed in at an estimated 10 to 20 tons, which I know sounds like a lot, but they were actually quite slender and sleek compared to their much bulkier cousins like the Brachiosaurs.
I really want you to visualize that 90-foot maximum length for a second. If you were to line up standard yellow school buses bumper to bumper, this single animal would stretch as long as 3 of them. Just massive.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of a Titan. How on earth was a creature of this unbelievable size actually built?
The structural engineering of the Diplodocus is a real marvel. You've got this tiny, elongated skull sitting way out at the end of a massive neck, which is then perfectly balanced by a super long whip-like tail. Now, to support all that length without just collapsing under its own weight, the Diplodocus evolved these specialized air-filled or pneumatic vertebrae. This kept their skeleton unbelievably light for its size. And if you look closely at how they were built, their front legs were actually shorter than their hind legs, giving them this distinct, low-slung posture that swept in a wide arc back and forth as they moved.
And speaking of that famous tail, it alone had around 80 individual vertebrae in it. That means this long, tapering, whip-like structure literally made up nearly half of the dinosaur's entire body length.
Let's jump into Section 3, Diet and Daily Life, to see how they survived. We're traveling back 150 million years now, and it all started small, really small. Diplodocus actually hatched from eggs. And because they started out so tiny in a world just packed with giant predators, these young dinos had to grow incredibly fast. Paleontologists think they were highly social creatures that lived and moved in herds. This would have been absolutely crucial for protecting those vulnerable juveniles as they navigated a super dangerous Jurassic world.
But how does a herd of 3 school bus-long animals actually feed themselves? Well, their feeding process was totally unique. For starters, they couldn't even chew. No, really. They had these weird, simple peg-like teeth right at the front of their jaws. They used them like little rakes to simply strip leaves, ferns, and mosses straight off the branches, and then they'd swallow all that vegetation basically whole. To actually digest those tough Jurassic plants, it's highly likely they relied on gastroliths, stones they intentionally swallowed that just sat in their gut, grinding together like a giant biological blender to break down all that plant matter.
But where do they find all those leaves to begin with? Believe it or not, this is still a massive debate in paleontology. Their low-slung necks were perfectly adapted for just vacuuming up low-growing ferns across the ground. But some researchers actually think they could rear up on their massive hind legs, using that heavy tail as a sort of kickstand to reach way up into the towering conifer trees. Just imagine seeing that.
All right, Section 4, Discovery and Legacy.
The story of how Diplodocus went from a buried fossil to a global superstar is super fascinating. It all kicked off back in 1878 when American paleontologist O.C. Marsh first formally described it. But it hit superstar status in the early 1900s. A nearly complete skeleton was dug up in Wyoming, and wealthy philanthropist Andrew Carnegie actually commissioned plaster casts of the whole thing. He basically shipped these casts to museums all over the globe. Europe, South America, Asia. The most famous one, affectionately named Dippy, stood right in the main entrance hall of London's Natural History Museum for decades, acting as the ultimate ambassador for dinosaurs, until a blue whale skeleton finally took its spot in 2017.
Finally, Section 5, Frequently Asked Questions. We're going to tackle the top 4 questions you guys have about the Diplodocus.
Question number 1. What does the name Diplodocus actually mean? It's iconic for sure, but it can be a bit of a mouthful.
So it comes from two Greek words, duplos, meaning double, and dokos, meaning beam. Put them together and you get double beam. O.C. Marsh gave it this name to highlight a really weird anatomical feature. Underneath the vertebrae of its massive tail, it had these highly unusual double-beamed chevron bones. These essentially acted as structural support and protected its blood vessels when that huge tail rested on the ground.
Question number 2. Did this massive dinosaur have any predators? I mean, did an animal this huge actually have anything to be afraid of?
The short answer is yes, the Late Jurassic was a truly terrifying place. They shared their ecosystem with absolute nightmares like the apex predator Allosaurus and the massive Torvosaurus. But here is the catch. A healthy, fully grown, 90-foot Diplodocus was basically a walking fortress. It was just way too big to take down. So those predators would specifically target the vulnerable juveniles, or the sick and old adults that accidentally wandered away from the safety of the herd.
Which brings us right to question number 3. How fast did these animals have to grow?
Like we mentioned, every Diplodocus started its life hatching from an egg, meaning they entered the world as a tiny, bite-sized snack for a hungry Allosaurus. To survive, their biology was dialed in for unbelievably rapid growth. They had to pack on size as fast as literally possible to grow out of that vulnerable danger zone, reaching a massive body size where they became virtually untouchable.
And finally, our fourth and definitely most debated FAQ. Did its tail really break the sound barrier?
Okay, this is one of the wildest theories in paleontology right now. We know they used that tail for balance, and probably as a whip to defend themselves. But because the very end of the tail tapered down into these incredibly thin, lightweight vertebrae, some scientists theorize they could flick it fast enough to literally break the sound barrier. It would have produced a deafening, supersonic crack. Whether they used the sonic boom to talk to each other across vast miles, or just to scare the daylights out of a predator, it is a hotly debated but incredibly cool possibility.
We've seen how this animal used rocks in its stomach to digest whole branches and walk the earth on air-filled bones. It really makes you stop and wonder. If a 90-foot giant could thrive for millions of years on a diet it couldn't even chew, what other mind-blowing biological marvels are just waiting to be decoded in the fossil record? Thanks so much for joining this Animal Notebook Explainer. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and we'll see you in the next one.